Yes, only me, or at least it will be spotlighted. So many things to remember there. So, as always, a nice gentle start, and I think as a general principle, start where you are rather than where you think you ought to be, or even where you'd like to be. You know, just it's almost like you just do a little assessment of yourself. So the routine can help with that. Just rubbing your hands together and then tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. Arm. The other side. Down to your belly. And finally, release. So sitting back, let your weight drop back into the chair. Take some slow, gentle breaths. You just have a sense of both the tightness in your belly and your chest and your shoulders and then your body beginning to melt away. But also by following that process, by paying attention to that process, there'll be a similar response in your thoughts, just this sense of emptying is one way of describing it, but no word is particularly good. Settling is probably better than empty. Your thoughts aren't empty, you will still be thinking. No way we're trying to stop them or ignore them or anything like that, but we just sit back from them. And then bringing your feet in, coming back to the upright position. And that process is a kind of consistently running thing in the back of everything that we do. And so the exercises that we do become an alternative focus for our attention. And the movements will benefit from that, as we know. So turning your head. And then shoulders. And then going forwards. Hands down to your sides and winding around. Excuse me a second. No, I'm getting a little sign. I don't know what's going on. Oh. Sorry, every now and then Zoom flashes up odd little notes. It was nothing significant. And then winding around, still trying to use your whole arm, shoulder, muscles of your chest and upper back in the movement. Very gentle feeling, but quite a strong feeling by the time it reaches your fingers. You almost imagine you're pressing your fingers against a soft wall or something like that and just drawing a circle with them. Go back the other way. Let your hands rest. And knees forwards. And push back. And turn a little. And then the other way. And then around. And that way. Remember in the back of your mind that sort of sense of sinking, of settling, very much aided by the pull of gravity. It's a very real physical effect to notice. It's like gravity drawing back more into your hips, and then you can begin to step. Use this foot, use the foot that's flat on the floor. Push down gently to bring the foot back. Good. Okay, and then on the other side. Just in position. And then alternating from one side to another. And come back to it. So just, you probably shifted out of position a little bit there. Give yourself a moment to settle down. And these moments where we just come back to this feeling are actually hugely significant. And you know, the phrase I like from the Tai Chi writings is we seek the stillness within the movement. So now we can find those little moments all the way through the exercises. Turn your hands out, ease forward, and there's that moment of settling in the feet. You go back, there's that moment of settling in the hips. Movement should always start in your feet or your hip, depending whereabouts in the movement you are. Gradually building up through your body, these little changes and subtle movements, building on that basic impetus from the lower body. And then changing, fisherman casting. And then coming over, there's a ball there, drawing in, feeling your hips drop back and your shoulders following, the hands following your shoulders. And then pigeon spreads its wings. and pushing away. Or if you prefer the name, pushing the boat. Either way, you get that sense of a sort of soft resistance that, again, this is another way in which we can begin to really focus, to gather our attention around a particular movement, a particular act, a particular intent. Over time, you'll find that that gathering of your attention into a particular place for a few moments, never for very long, unless you're holding the posture, which we tend to do in this class, is a kind of natural response, that training of your attention to gather in that way, to focus in that way, impacts on other things that you do. One more time, and then punch with both hands. And turning your hands out. Bring your hands in and push up. Your hips and your feet push down, your upper body seems to lengthen a little bit and then contract, almost as though it was sort of drawing into your hips. One more time. And then changing. and then parting the clouds. Now going back to rooting down, and let's do these three movements in a little sequence. So they all involve that pushing down and that sense of lengthening through the body, but a little bit different as your arms come up and out. There's a kind of broadening effect across the solar plexus, and then that broadening effect right up through your body a little further. So what if you don't actually experience it like that? This is what I'm really saying to you is how I sort of interpret what I'm feeling. And it may be that you experience it in a different way. It doesn't necessarily mean you're doing the exercise wrong. It can be a bit like interpreting a picture or a poem or something like that. Just do check that physically you're doing the right things, but apart from that, just observe what is going on. One more round of this. Now dragon plucks the stars from the sky. So with both this one and with the next one, pushing in 2 and then 4 directions, there's an automatic built-in shift from one movement to another, in this case from one side to another. So again, we can take the opportunity just to notice the change. One more time on each side. And then changing. All around this, and then we're going to the turn. So now you have to turn it. One more round. Now scooping the sea and looking at the sky. Good, and then switch to grasping the tiger's ears. Then on the other side. And then hands loosely fisted. Sit back. Settle down for a moment. A couple of slow, gentle breaths. And then go back into this rotating movement. Keep doing this in the chair, but I'm going to stand up because I think you'll see what's happening in my hips and my pelvis more easily there. So when I do it standing, what I'm doing is the pelvis is tilting forward slightly and then to the side. I'm exaggerating this, and then back to the side. So it's this movement here. Maybe you'll see it better here. Oh yeah. It's not a big movement, and it's even smaller when it's in the chair. But perhaps you can see, if I make it very big, this is way too big, by the way. You'll see the sort of thing that's going on. And that's the feeling you want to try and get in the middle of your body. One difference being, when we do this in the chair, the weight will move forwards and backwards a little. And that will probably happen quite naturally. So it's typical that in the shift from standing to chair base, some things change, but essentially, you know, this is a movement from the center. And what's moving your weight is the turning in the middle of your body. It doesn't happen in the chair, and it doesn't happen standing, because there isn't any way to move your weight to. There's a slight sideways movement, but there's no forwards and backwards movement. Now with your right hand, just let your right hand follow that movement. And to begin with, it's quite passive. It just sits there. But then after a while, two things really can happen. One is that your arm lengthens slightly as you go forwards, never locking the elbow. And the other thing is that this space here between your arm and your chest opens out a little bit as the arm goes out. And those two movements combined, they're quite small, but when they're put together with the rest of the movement, gradually increase the range of your movement without causing a strain in the body. So you never lose that connection to the center. Now try going in the other direction. So remember, you know, things like the turn, you'll see me turning a little bit, but you won't see me turning a lot, because the nature of the chair-based exercises is, as I've often said, that a lot of these movements are a great deal more subtle. Now try your left hand. So this is leading up to the exercise stirring the beans. This is one of those exercises that will get a little bit confusing when we bring both hands into the movement. And the encouragement is always going to be to draw your attention away from the hand and into the, it's not exactly a fixed point, but into the common denominator, which is in your belly. You know, you can see here, if I simply start turning in my hips and my waist the other way, my hand follows. Okay, now this time as your hand comes down, bring your other hand out, and now we're making alternating movements, stirring the beans. So you can't really see what my hips are doing that easily, but have a look at what my shoulders are doing. Here, my right shoulder's going back, drawing my right hand back. And now my right hand, with the turn of the body, goes forwards, right hand goes forward. With the left, it's the opposite way around. And the shoulders are moved by the turning in the center. A little bit of movement of the weight, just as much as you need to really get the sort of emphasis of the forwards and backwards. So that won't be a lot. But try not to think of this as two separate movements, one with each hand, one movement of your body. Slowly, okay. Okay. Sit for a moment. Now we're going to do bear play. So let your hands drop down to your sides and turn in. Not so different to the previous one, stirring the beans, except that here the hands are making an alternating vertical circle. So there's an expansion here on one side of your body. So if you could imagine, for instance, doing Dragon Plucks the Stars from the Sky with a turning movement, that, that alternating expansion between one side and another is still happening here. So the turning in the center of your body can trigger a remarkably different looking exercise. Whilst internally, there's quite a lot of common ground between the two. Often the change from one movement to another is really quite simple. Good. And rest. Okay, so rubbing your hands together. And then tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. And your arm. the side. Your chest. Belly. And your legs. Okay, and then stand. Always rest when you need to. Never push things. And it's really important that we recognize that we're human beings, not robots. This isn't a matter about maintaining a constant performance. All sorts of things can change for us internally and externally from day to day. If you're looking to sort of like measure your progress, which isn't always a helpful thing, sometimes it can be useful, then it should be over a long period of time, but that's not a straight line. There's dips and troughs. You know, look back a month, 2 months, a year, whatever it gets. Says, oh yeah, so like a year ago I was struggling with that exercise. Now mostly I'm able to do it, or something like that. And then sinking down and pushing up. And then mongoose. And passing the powers. One more time. And shake out. Now have your feet slightly wider apart and turn your feet out a little bit. Let your hips drop back and begin to move your weight from side to side. Now what you may find already is that your body is starting to turn a little bit. It's quite natural for us to do that. You know, if I'm If my feet are pointing this way, I would tend to face that way. If I want to face that way, I'll tend to step around. I mean, it's obvious when you think about it, but sometimes the obvious isn't always obvious, I suppose. Now, we learn Tai Chi by building up from the feet. It's a good linear way of learning, but actually, we're told that the movement is controlled from the center of the body. So the interaction between our feet, legs, and the center of the body isn't just one way. We can choose to look at it in one way or another, and that can be quite useful. But ultimately, it's going to be a combination of both the transfer of the weight and the turning. You could, for instance, leave the weight in one place and turn on one leg. Or you could move the weight and not turn. So it depends on the movement that you're doing. But just try and get this sense. Sometimes sink down and then push from the foot and just feel how that affects the center. And then sometimes just turn, and that would tend to pull you over this way a little bit, unless you're doing a movement that requires you not to do that, and you're applying a very definite intent not to do that. So we're not stuck in one way of doing things. There are ways that are more clear, more obvious, like turning towards the feet, and like when we turn the body, we'll tend to affect the weight. But we can, without straining, without sort of losing the harmony of the body, also do things differently sometimes. Depends on the exercise and depends on the circumstance. So once we've established that linear relationship, we're aware that there's a connection. Any connection that we make in the body, or most of them at least, can be two-way. The feet can affect the center can affect the feet. We have these choices. It's like within the inner landscape of the body, there's all these pathways. And we think, well, which one should we go down today? It's not that one is better than another. Okay, now have one foot forwards and just trying as much as possible to begin with to keep your weight forwards. To keep your body facing forwards. I'm getting confused between the weights. Now settle your weight into your back foot, facing forwards, or you could turn slightly in the direction of the back foot, or you could turn a little opposite the direction of the back foot. You go forwards, have your weight in the front leg, saying the same thing, you're facing forwards, to the right, or to the left. And there's various circumstances, in the exercise that we're doing in a minute, Wind Blows the Willows, we would be turning this way. But just recognize that, we're not rigid machines, that we have some kind of choices about which way we turn. We start off learning the simple choices, but that opens up our awareness of what's happening within the body. Now sit back and raise your toes and your heel. And then stepping in. And on the other side. remember, you know, you could play around with this. Sometimes one way is easier than another. But traditionally, this exercise would be done facing forwards. Never force anything. You might find, as I say, that this tends to be a bit stiffer than that way because you're kind of turning a little bit against the direction of the feet. But again, we can do that a little without straining. And then raising your toes and your heel. And stepping in. Okay. Now, have your first foot forward. You're going to go straight into wind blows or willows because I want you to feel that. So move your weight into your back foot. Try and have your right foot forward actually, if you mirror my movement. And just turn gently towards the front foot. Don't move towards the front foot. And when you do that, just let the arms swing out. And go forward, sink into the front foot. Turn the opposite way. You turn away from the front foot. You could do this exercise either way, by the way, but I tend to do it like this for when we get into doing it with the stepping. So again, we've got that combination of weight moving, center turning, and your attention focused through the center. You might find with all this detail that I'm giving you that the exercise doesn't flow, but if you just keep bearing this in mind, eventually what will happen is the details will fade away, but you'll have a different perspective on the exercise. Good. And then on the other side, so sink back, turn towards the front foot. If we can gradually begin to center our attention in the center of the body, then we find that we have more options. We can choose which way to turn. We can choose when to move the weight, where the weight goes to, and also because that center part of the body becomes the part of the body that sort of drops into the ground. Like if you were playing billiards or something like that, the ball drops down the hole. So we're still aware of the weight moving, of course, but this is sort of an advanced development in many ways. And then, good, go back to your chairs. So I hope that hasn't been confusing for you. I don't, I'm kind of trying to seed ideas rather than to force you into doing things one way or another. Play around with those ideas. don't feel that you're stuck in any one way of doing things. But remember, the more you practice a way of doing something, the more familiar it becomes. And then if there's another way of doing it that's familiar, what happens eventually is a kind of blending, almost like getting two separate ingredients to cook with and putting them in a pot and just letting them blend with each other in terms of flavor. So it's a slow process, but quite an interesting. So just bring your weight slightly forward, let your hands drop down. And then just back to this feeling of settling with embrace tiger, return to mountain. One more time. And rest. Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody. I hope that was not too confusing for you. That just gives you a different perspective on some familiar movements. Yeah. Right. Okay, then. Enjoy the rest of your day, then, everybody. I think it's a bit chilly, but hopefully it's been warming up a bit. Thanks very much.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.